the food you eat can be either the safest and most powerful form of medicine or the slowest form of poison. All right. Well, today it is just me and you, and I want to discuss with you a topic that I've been pondering for a long, long time, and I've been trying to narrow it down. And it was only recently I was on somebody else's show, a good mate of mine, Guy Leach in Australia. Most Australians would know Leachy. He was on the podcast actually about 6 months ago on this show, and he has a new show called The Longevity Lounge. And so in preparation for that, I started really jotting down my thoughts on longevity and looking at interventions in sort of figuring out how we can have a healthier and longer life and a better quality of life. And in that show, I proposed my 8 pillars for longevity. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to bring that straight back onto my show, this one, and share it with you guys. And I think it might actually cause a little bit of discussion. I'm sure we will have, I'm hoping I'll have some pushback from you all, or maybe you'll all just totally agree with everything I say in terms of the 8 pillars of longevity and how I've actually prioritized them from 1 to 8. It's an interesting topic for me and an area that I'm leaning into more and more with different businesses that I'm in. So I just thought, you know what, let's just get it out there to the world. But before I do, I want to rewind and have a look at this past quarter because it has been about 3 or 4 months since I was last on just speaking directly with you and not having a guest. And I want to look back at the amazing guests that I've had on the show, going all the way back to start this last quarter where I had Sebastian Kinley on for the second time. He was one of my very first interviews on the show almost 5 years ago now. And just had him back on the show and we really discussed his final year in the sport of triathlon, how he went around the world doing all his favorite events. And then we just discussed his transition and what that's like at the moment. And he gives some really great insights on, it's not all roses, transitioning from being a professional athlete. But he's doing great, and it was wonderful to have him back on the show. Next up, I had Alex Keith, Dr. Alex Keith, my chiropractor from 2004, very much a core of my team throughout my career. Not only the greatest at what he does in terms of chiropractic work and body work, but also just one of the greatest people you could ever meet. And just having his energy around me throughout my career was amazing. We discuss his journey. We discuss his journey from working with Olympic athletes, whether it be myself or the USA triathlon team, and his experiences going to the Olympics, but also transitioning to becoming Jimmy Buffett, the famous musician who only just passed away recently, but he was his right hand for about 10 years and that journey that he shared. I then had Cam Worth back on the show. And again, a bit like Sebastian Kinley, he was one of my very first episodes that I ever had almost 5 years ago. And Cam, having him back on, he's just such a legend, this guy, honestly, to be able to do what he does, from Olympic rower to cycling and triathlon and combining the two of them. He's just, there's something about Cam. He's so ambitious that it's contagious, that you leave these episodes, these conversations with him going, yeah, I can take on the world. He's somebody that I would want to have in my corner going forward. He's just somebody that believes anything's possible. And you get caught up in that with Cam. And honestly, it feels like with him, anything is possible. It'll be interesting to watch him come Kona this year. I'm excited for him to really nail that one down and see what he can do at Kona. Then moved on to Scott Tyndall. It was also Scott Tyndall, Master Nutrition. He came back on the show discussing his app Fuelin and his work with Jan Frodeno, who's now an owner and working at Fuelin with him as Chief Performance Officer there at Fuelin. So go check that app out. Scott Tyndall, another good mate of mine who's really charging forward, entrepreneur. I always love the entrepreneurial stories. They really fall in line with being a professional athlete. I kind of feel like we all share similar journeys. So big shout out to Scott and what he's doing at Fuelin. So go check it out. Then I had on Tim Henning. And honestly, I want to have Tim on multiple times. Nobody knows the sport better than this guy. He has his finger on the pulse with everything that's going on around the world, whatever the distance, whatever the format. Tim knows the sport of triathlon. And that was just an amazing conversation. We predict whether it's Olympics or the World Championship titles coming up. It was a hard one to predict because it was still very much early in the season and we hadn't had much of a guide in terms of knowing who's going to do what. But really great conversation with Tim. I will be bringing him back on the show. Next up, one of my dearest, closest friends for well over 30 years. And we caught up and had lunch the other day, actually. And that's Craig Alexander, known to many as Crowy. And this episode with Craig, where he shares the story of his son, Austin, and everything Austin's gone through. Don't miss that one. Austin had a stroke that led to being paralyzed from the chest down, and their journey into rehab. It's just absolutely an outstanding episode. Crowy opens up. The feedback I've had from that episode, I don't think I've ever had as much feedback. Hearing all your stories and what you've all been through, working with family members and everything else. This show is often about celebrating high performance and entrepreneurship and everything else, but every now and then it's great to get a good slap of perspective and know that we're all human and we're all going through a lot. So big shout out to Craig and Austin. It was so great for me personally to catch up with them last week. We brought our two families together in Circular Quay in Sydney. And you couldn't get a more beautiful human being than his son, Austin. So big shout out to the whole family, Craig, Neri, and all the kids. Just unbelievable episode, and I'm really grateful for that one. Then I had on nutrition expert Alex Larson, who absolutely phenomenal. What I loved about Alex was she simplified nutrition and basically said, look, at the end of the day, if you're an endurance athlete, for the most part, many of you are not eating enough. And so that was a really good, if you want some great takeaways and call to actions when it comes to around your fueling for your events, don't miss that episode with Alex Larson. And even reach out to her if you want to work with her. She is phenomenal. And just, how do I put it? Really great bedside manner. I just felt really comfortable talking to Alex. So reach out to her. Next episode I had up was the Olympic gold medalists, the men. I have had all the women on before. If you want to dial back to the end of 2021, I had all the Olympic gold medalists, including Flora Duffy, who was our most recent Olympic gold medalist on. But this one was the men, Jan Frodeno, Hamish Carter, Simon Whitfield, and Alistair Brownlee. I wasn't able to get Christian Blumenfeld on because he was actually racing that weekend in Italy. But that was a really great episode to reconnect with these guys. A lot of them are further on in their journeys into being not athletes. Jan Frodeno is recently retired, as many of you know. Hamish Carter and Simon Whitfield are on their various journeys and pursuing all sorts of things. And Alistair Brownlee, well, look, he just blows me away in every aspect of his life, whether it be in sport, business, politics. He's got his finger on the pulse everywhere. He's an incredible individual as well. But for me, it's just, I don't know, it feels kind of special. If you can bring on four guys that I would all call mates, but at the same time, I respect them very highly, not only for them in the physical sense and what they did in sport, but just as men. They're good people, and I'm grateful for all of them. Next up, I had Nick Johnson. We talked about mental health, specifically in executives. That's his area of expertise, working with loneliness at the top. An interesting conversation, mental health, mental performance, and he shares some of his guides into how he helps people, reach their potential and not get caught up in, I guess, the downward spiral that can happen in mental health. So another great episode. Next up was Troy Taylor. Troy, if you haven't listened to that one, I loved it because it comes from a company called Tonal, which is only in the US, but it's a strength-based platform that sits on your wall in your house. And what I loved about this episode was they've collected 2 billion pounds of data. So what I mean by that is they've collected every push and pull from the hundreds of thousands of users that they have, every push and pull using their equipment. So they actually have a great understanding of human physiology through data collection and understanding from, I think he said, from 18-year-olds to 80-year-olds, and how physical movement works for all of those people. A really great episode. I like that one because it was a different take on the way that we are going forward in physical movement and sport, and the data that we're collecting and how specific we can get. Still early stages in my mind, but a great conversation, one that surprised me and I thoroughly enjoyed. The next one was a sit down in person with Braden Curry. And this is the first time I'd had Braden on the show. In fact, we hadn't met in person, but I've always been a huge fan of his. And this one was an absolutely incredible episode. Braden's amazing. His background in sport and what he's done, especially in the adventure racing world, and then moving over to triathlon. The guy's unbelievable. He's one of those guys that makes you feel, as another guy, makes you almost feel a little inadequate in his ability to do so much. I thoroughly enjoyed just chatting with him. We were actually chatting in Jan Ferdino's house in Noosa Heads, which Braden was renting off Jan. And it was just great to connect, have a great conversation. He went off to get second at Cairns Ironman. We recorded, I think, on the Tuesday before he was flying out to do Cairns, and he got second. He wanted the win, but Matt Burton got him, and I had Matt Burton on the show a couple of episodes after that. But listen to that one. Luke McKenzie, big shout out, mate. Luke and Beth, they are two of my favorite people. These two give to the sport and love the sport as much as anybody you could ever meet. The world of triathlon is all the better for having both, Luke and Beth in it, both phenomenal athletes themselves, and then now with their entrepreneurial journey into the clothing brand Win Republic. Go check out Win Republic. Their community, their club are called Winners. Go check out all their gear. Support them. They are two of the most supportive people you could ever get. They go to all the big races. They cheer on everybody on the sidelines. They're really, really working their butts off, but they're also great parents and great friends, and just phenomenal for the world of triathlon. So it was great to have a sit down in person with Luke at his house, also in Noosa. The following week, I had Matt Burton on. Matt, big shout out to Matt. That was one of my favorite inspirational episodes. He, honestly, Matt, I had a number of you reach out. You got to have Matt on your show. I'd never met Matt. And then I saw him win Cairns Ironman. And then I looked into his story and his journey and just the years and years and years of perseverance until finally winning a big, big race in the Asia Pacific Championships in Cairns. And hell of a story, great storyteller himself. And I'd call him a good friend after that episode. He was, what a good man. I think if you're a fan of the sport, you need to listen to that one and just listen to the story of perseverance. I loved it. And then the following week, talking about unbelievable inspiration, Kat Matthews. Now, Kat, for many of you, you've probably listened to her story. You've heard what happened to her from a near-fatal car accident and her journey back. I hadn't had Kat on the show. And I'd done that a little bit on purpose. There was a little bit of, I felt like every podcaster out there had Kat on for a moment. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to let this one just ride out and sit for a little bit. And then I reached out to her and said, would you come on? And she was amazing. She came onto the show, told her story. And boy, I'm a huge fan of Kat. Now, I think the biggest takeaway for me was that she was almost on her deathbed there after getting hit by a car. And not for a moment did she play the victim. She got herself out of the hospital, checked herself out, got herself to Hawaii Ironman because the crash happened, right before, a week or so before the race. Got herself to the race and tried to support the community and just show that she was okay. And she didn't go there to say, I need all the, the attention seeking, or it was there truly to just support the sport. And then her comeback journey has just been unbelievable and has to be one of the favorites this year going into the World Championships in Nice. But she has a huge fan in me now after that episode. It was absolutely fantastic. And then the last couple of episodes with Dr. Scott Frey, neuroscientist and sports psychology, absolutely phenomenal. I love discussing everything above the shoulders. If you've listened to this show enough, you know that I love sports psychology. I love the idea of what you think has a direct impact on your physiology. All of that for me, I've always been a big believer in visualizing and everything else. And with Dr. Scott Frey, we get in deep on that one. It was a fantastic episode. And again, the next week with Grant Giles, former professional athlete himself, then, getting into the mental performance space also, there was even more takeaways in that episode. It was almost like a back-to-back week, so I really doubled down on the mental performance side of things. And great episodes that if you just want to understand and get some techniques on how to sort of optimize your performance, don't miss those episodes. Now, before I jump into my 8 pillars, I also want to just highlight the amazing Fireside Friday conversations I've had. I've been doing it since December. I've had well over 50, I think I'm up to about, actually might be 60 now, conversations with all of you. And they've been wonderful every Friday, just doing a couple of conversations. Haven't done many the last couple of weeks as I've been in Australia, but it's been really phenomenal just getting to know you all. I've had conversations with young aspiring athletes that want to become, professional triathletes, to people undertaking just epic events all around the world. I've connected with people from Kuwait to Perth, from the Pyrenees to Brazil, and everywhere in between. And these journeys have just moved me just so much. I started this Fireside Fridays, and I remember talking to Laura going, look, I just feel like I want to give back a little bit somehow. I don't know. I do this podcast and that's great, but I also felt I'd like to connect with you more. And so I started doing it. And I've since realized I'm actually just getting so much more back from all of you. The stories, the journeys, what I'd love to do. I've got to make one of these next businesses I'm doing turn into billions of dollars, and then I can just fly you all in to meet each other. Because I truly think the people listening to this podcast, my community that I'm involved with, are the greatest people on the planet. And so I think you all have to meet each other. I think you'll be as blown away with each other as I am. And I'd say out of all these conversations I've had with all of you, I'd call you all my friends now. I feel like my community has just gotten bigger. It's gotten better. And I've been totally inspired by all of you. So just big shout out to all of you. Too many names to mention. I was going to start mentioning names. I was like, no, I'm going to leave somebody out and I don't want to. So please just, know that I'm a huge fan of all of you and I'm truly grateful. So without further ado, let's dive into the 8 pillars of longevity. Now I have this list 1 to 8 and it is in order of what I think is the most important. That can shift in my mind depending on where you are in your life a little bit. I think it can go up and down, but I'm also prepared to put it, go out on a limb and say, look, these are my things. And so I kind of want to just quickly run through what the 8 are first off, and then I'll go into detail on each of them. So 1, for longevity and health, I put socialization and relationships. Number 2, mindset and mental performance or mental strategies. Number 3, physical training or physical movement. Number 4, sleep and recovery. Number 5, nutrition. Except for water, I take water out and I'll put that way up at the top. But nutrition as a whole, I have at number 5. Number 6, biomechanics or let's just call it mobility and stability. Number 7, curiosity and learning. And number 8, overall health maintenance. Now, I know some of you are probably kicking and screaming, going, why is nutrition at number 5? That's probably the big one that everybody's going to be talking about. I'm not saying nutrition's not important. It's on the list. I just sometimes think we put it too high on the list of what makes life worth living, quality of life, and longevity. So I'll start with a quote here. And this is from Mother Teresa. And I love this quote. And it's, loneliness and the feeling of being unwanted is the most terrible poverty. And I love that because it's kind of this, when we're around others, I believe in this energy that's in between all of us, and that we're made up of energy, and the fact that we need to be around each other to live. And in fact, I dived into the science of sort of understanding socialization just a little bit, and there was a meta-analytic review published in PLOS Medicine that basically found that individuals with strong social relationships have a 50% increased likelihood of survival compared to those with weaker social connections. And that blew me away. That number alone, that basically if you're a lonely individual, if you don't have people around you that love you, that care for you, and the same way you're not loving and caring to others, that is an amazing statistic. That if you have that, you can have an increase of survival of 50%. I just thought that was amazing. It's an area that I've spent more and more time thinking about it. You know, what's the point of life? What are we really doing here? And I kind of feel like at its core that if you have strong social relationships, that it gives meaning to everything else that you do. I find things like focusing on sleep, physical movement, and nutrition and these kinds of things easier to do when you have your why in place, to quote Simon Sinek on that. It's like if your why is big enough, if you're around the right people, the actions involved for the other steps in longevity, in my pillars here, come around so much easier. So it's an area that I invest in heavily, whether it's with my family, my friendships, Fireside Fridays, doing this podcast. For me, it's the most important thing on the list, that we remain social beings and it gives meaning to the rest on the list. The second one, mindset and mental performance or mental strategies. You've heard me say on the show how much I think this is an important area. And the quote that I love, whether it's when Tommy Wood came on and he said, what you think has a direct impact on your physiology, or the quote from Henry Ford, which many of you know, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And for me, there's this, if we can try and understand the importance of everything above the shoulders and the impact that the brain can have on our physiology, all of a sudden you start to really realize the priority of giving this as much energy as possible. And you've heard me say many times on the show that I like to get a good slapper perspective to start the day. And that for me is often just starting with gratitude and being grateful for, fresh air and running water and a roof over my head and family around me, and then, food in the cupboard or in the fridge, and living in a peaceful society for the most part. For me, all of those things help me get incredibly grounded and get to neutral really fast. And when I talk about mindset, my goal is to not be happy all the time and not be positive all the time. I feel like they're unrealistic goals. My goal is to always try and get to neutral. And when I'm at neutral, then I can allow positivity and happiness to come in. What I do my best at is removing negativity, and that could be whether that's watching 24/7 news cycles, or being around negative people, or having negative thoughts that I'm hanging on to for too long. I do my best to try and get to neutral. And I'll share you a story recently where I had to work on this sort of in the moment. I was trying to get my mum's Wi-Fi a higher speed here in Australia so I could record podcasts and things. And anyway, the Telstra, the local phone company, said, yeah, it'll be on at midnight. The guy in the shop told me that. And then next day, nothing happened. And next day, nothing happened. So I went up to the store and I couldn't talk to the same guy. There was another woman there. Oh, no, it always takes 3 to 5 days, she told me. And I said, well, he told me, it was going to be a couple of nights ago. Anyway, then I'm talking to customer service on the phone and I felt my blood boiling. You just feel like ripping down, you're putting your arm down the phone and ripping their throat out. But That's a terrible thing to say, but you get what I'm saying. And then I thought, well, hang on, this person on the phone has no idea what's going on. And while I was sort of being aggressive to them on the phone, I quickly thought, hang on, this is only impacting you. Nothing's getting done. You're upsetting them. It's an energy that none of you like to be around. So I quickly thought to myself, get back to neutral as quick as you can, and changed my attitude immediately. And I said to the guy, look, I'm sorry, mate. I think I came at you a little hard. It's not your fault. The guy in the shop told me it was going to be one night. And I know you're now saying a couple of days, but I'm just letting you know, I apologize. And I'm telling you, he went away for about a minute, came back and said, all right, Mr. Bennett, Greg, it'll be on in the next couple of hours. And it was one of those where I got myself to neutral really quick. I got him back to neutral in a way by just changing my behavior. And it was amazing how the day just changed for everybody. And so it was one of those, yes, it's a silly little story, but it's impactful in the sense that if we can get ourselves to neutral faster and faster and faster, it's amazing how good things in the universe tend to come our way. And it's an area I've been playing around with for quite some time. And one that I think we can all do better, taking more and more control of our thoughts and our thinking. And again, it's not about saying, I want my life to be happy and positive all the time. I think those are unrealistic goals. And I think there's all these books and everybody out there telling us how to find happiness. For me, it's not about finding happiness. It's really about making sure we don't go down the downward spiral of negativity, and working on techniques, whether it's breathing or just thinking and visualizing on getting ourselves to neutral. It's amazing the impact that can have. Number 3, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir for all of you listening, and that is physical training. There's enough research and science on this. I love the quote, exercise is the closest thing we have to a magic bullet for health and longevity, from Dr. Mark Tarnopolsky. And I just feel like that's an amazing quote in itself, and one that I think we all know that are listening to this show. The science is there. A study in sports medicine showed that regular physical training leads to a 30% reduction in all-cause mortality and a 25% reduction in the risk of developing chronic diseases such as heart disease and diabetes. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir to all of you. You're all nodding your head. But let's keep moving. Let's keep working the aerobic conditioning. Let's throw in some VO2 work every now and then. Let's work on some strength work and keep that going consistently for all of our lives. That's a no-brainer for me. Number 4, sleep and recovery. Again, a bit of a no-brainer. The science is there. It really is. There's a quote here from Thomas Dekker: sleep is the golden chain that ties health and our bodies together. Sleep, it's just so essential for recovery and cognitive function and just overall well-being. One of the things that Laura and I have always worked on is making sure we set an exact time to go to bed. I remember Tim O'Donnell saying, never call the Bennetts after 8. And that's very true. These days, we put the kids to bed at 7 and we're sound asleep ourselves sort of by 7:38. And that's more because I actually love the mornings and getting up early than I do, staying up and watching shows or whatever at night. That just happens to be when I'm most productive. But sleep, making it an absolute priority. There was a research published in the New York Academy of Sciences that said that individuals that get 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night have a 15% lower risk of developing chronic disease and a 20% higher rate of recovery from illnesses compared to those who get less than 7 hours. Now, in saying all of that, I've gone through phases where I'm doing 4 to 5 hours sleep for a month or two, and I operate pretty well. And then I tend to have almost a massive hibernation type sleep, sort of once a quarter when I've gone through those phases. I think the most important thing for me when I talk about sleep is not even the 7 to 8 hours like that study showed, but more trying to go to bed at the same time every night. And that can be difficult. I get it. But trying to find a time that'll work for you, make it happen. That's a big one. Number 5, nutrition. And it's 5th on the list. Yes, but it's on the list. I think it's only number 5 because I really look at it as the goal of nutrition in my mind is to remove bad nutrition. And I think it was Peter Attia who said a couple of months back, and I really liked it. He sort of was explaining that, look, you can have good nutrition or great nutrition, and the benefits are kind of minimal. Like it's sure there's some benefits, but it's not massively different. The point of nutrition is get yourself to as close to average as possible and remove the bad, and then just at least have some good nutrition. But having great nutrition, you're probably not going to feel the impacts that you might expect. And I think Peter Attia was talking about it. He was comparing it to physical training, and strength work, and basically saying, look, the benefits of physical training, do some, it gets you, to average good, but doing a lot of the right sort of stuff has magnificent benefits to you. Like physical training just kept going, whereas nutrition, they got to a point where the benefits, it's not that much different. So that's the only reason I have it at number 5. It's not to say it's not important, but it's just not as important as some of the others. And to quote Alex Larson in one of the episodes where she said, the beautiful thing is we have calories today. And yes, some of the calories are poor, and we can go into all the different types of oils and all the different types of sugars and everything else. And some of the stuff is toxic to the food, to us. In fact, there's a really good quote I'll share with you. The food you eat can be either the safest and most powerful form of medicine or the slowest form of poison. And that's from Anne Wigmore. And I love that quote because there is a point, it can be a really great medicinal, but at the same time, it can be poison. So that's where I sort of say, look, remove the bad, remove the poison, give your body a chance to heal itself. Number 6, moving right on, mobility and stability. As we get older, I know in myself, even at 52 right now, mobility, not one of my strong suits, in an area that I'm having to work on a little bit more, and working on, because I know in my 70s, if I don't, I'm in all sorts of trouble. If you don't move, you rust, to quote Tom Dixon. And that I've given it its own, rather than putting it up in physical training, which it probably could go in there. The reason it's separate is because I do believe it's a separate kind of area, the ability to just find mobility and stability. And so it's an area that I think we need to work on continually. Some of you have got it, no problem. But I've always heard the quote from my father-in-law, in fact, he's like, now he's in his 80s, and he says, all it takes is one fall. So it becomes a little bit more paramount as we age, as we get older. For those of you in your 20s and 30s and 40s are just shaking your heads going, what's Greg talking about? But I think as we get older, the idea to be stable, to be mobile, really is paramount. And like I said at the top of the show, maybe this 0.6 starts moving right up towards the top as we get older. And we all know people that have had that one fall, break their hip, and suddenly it's really a fast downward spiral from there. And so that's why it makes it on the list. Number 7, this was one that I added recently, and it's called curiosity and learning. It's to quote Albert Einstein, once you stop learning, you start dying. Once you stop learning, you start dying. And I think that to me is very profound, and it's something that I've noticed even in myself. Once I retired from sport, I went into coaching for a little bit, and yes, there was some learning for me there, but it wasn't as much learning as maybe as I'd hoped for. And so I started throwing myself into learning how to build a business, learning how to start a podcast, starting the podcast to learn from people every single week, starting 2 more businesses now that with different people in health and AI. And there's so much for me to try and take in and keep up with. I feel like I'm drinking through a fire hose the whole time. But it's also, I've realized I really feel alive. And I'm always amazed at how little I do know. And for me, it's been fascinating to just be downloading Audible books continually for the last few years. And really just trying to keep my brain alive, keep curiosity like I'm a kid alive. I'm an old dad. I've got young kids. So now I'm in the parenting world and having to learn, all of you nodding your heads there, learning how to get a 4-year-old to do something he doesn't want to do. It takes great skill. So I've found curiosity and learning is one of the areas that I think we need to keep working on. There's a study in the journals of, gerontology, that found that continued learning and intellectual engagement significantly enhance cognitive function and physical health in older adults, reducing the risk of dementia by 40%. And that reminds me of one of the episodes I did with Dr. Tommy Wood a couple of years ago, and we were breaking down, Dr. Tommy Wood. He's a professor in pediatric brain trauma, but his background, just quickly for those of you who don't know, undergraduate degree at Cambridge, medical degree at Oxford University, and then a PhD in neuroscience and physiology from Oslo University. And we have a lot of conversations about the brain and cognitive function. And in one of those episodes, we really talked about one of the greatest things we can all do for health and longevity is learning to dance. And I thought that was fascinating. We broke it down as to why learning to dance is so important and so useful for all of us. And I haven't done this yet, and I know Laura wants me to, but we really do have to go get dance lessons. It's there's the learning aspect for the cognitive function of the brain, learning steps. There's the music, which lights up the brain. There's the social aspect of being around others. There's the physical movement of actually dancing and moving and the stability and mobility. And there's just so much in learning to dance. So there we go, everybody. We've got to all go learn to dance and learning the steps of how to dance. I actually think for a lot of you that are doing triathlon, I think learning how to swim better, learning how to run with better technique or bike with better technique, I think you're actually getting a lot from that as well. But I still think we need to all go do ballroom dancing. Moving on to number 8 and the last one. And this is really just overall health maintenance. And a great quote from this one is, take care of your body. It's the only place you have to live, from Jim Rohn. And I think in this one, it's more about just, let's regular checkups, getting ahead of any disease risks that you might have. There's a research in JAMA, which emphasizes the importance of proactive health assessments in predicting and preventing serious health issues. So it says, with regular health checkups, reducing the risk of serious illness by 25% and increasing early detection rates by 35%. So it's one of those I encourage everybody to just do regular checkups. I'm not after you to do anything massive. In fact, I'm now consulting with a company called Voleridge Health. The name's still in the works, but I'll start probably working with them full-time towards the end of the year. And our whole goal is to use data science and look at the data to really understand disease risk in the most important diseases, the top 8 diseases, from cancer and heart disease, diabetes onwards, and really coming up with new ranges, new scores, because we've looked at what's out there in the world and how outdated they are. And so using data collected from all around the world, from all the various countries and regions of the world, to actually get definite insights as to what's going on in an individual's health. So that's a big area that I'm interested in, and an area that I think we can all do better in what Peter Attia described as medicine 3.0. So being preventative medicine rather than reactive medicine. I think we're all still stuck in the reactive medicine 2.0. It's an area that I think is on the rise. Combining that with large language models and AI, the data-driven science side of things is going to be fascinating in the health space going forward. So I'm very happy to be moving into that area myself. And I'll probably be, this podcast, I think will shift more and more into that probably later in the year, and bringing on a lot of special guests that come more in the health space and especially in the preventative health space. And that's kind of why I've started this, the 8 pillars of longevity. So that, to me, I've gone through the 8. I'd love to hear your feedback. I think I'm up for hearing and questioning my 8, by the way. I'm not saying this has to be the way, but it's for me how I like to look at all things. So that's socialization and relationships, number 1, mindset and mental performance, number 2, physical training, number 3, sleep and recovery, nutrition, then going into biomechanics or mobility and stability, curiosity and learning, and then finishing up with just overall health maintenance. So that's the show today. A big recap on the great episodes we've had this last quarter. Looking forward to the next quarter when we've got, so many big races in the world of triathlon. When we look at the Olympic Games, very excited about everything across the Olympic Games. I just think it's a great time of year. Wishing all the athletes that are going all the best of performances and all your safety, of course. Very excited about Kona, Nice, and all the world championships coming up in this next quarter. And then the final quarter, of course, we have 70.3 world champs and a bunch of others. Going for the Aussies, of course. Matt Hauser, go get him, buddy. Luke William, looking forward to seeing what the Aussie boys could do. I mentioned Matt mainly because he's been on the show. Hayden Wild's been on the show. Looking forward to, big shout out to Hayden, even though he's a Kiwi. Very excited about the Olympics coming up. The men's and the women's races are going to be outstanding. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. It is me just talking. I do this to challenge myself a little bit to see if I can actually talk for 40, 45 minutes. Here I am, sharing what I know. Tell me what you think of this episode. If you don't like it, if you'd rather me just stop talking and just bring on guests and ask the questions, that's fine. No hard feelings. If you want to do Fireside Fridays, I am probably reducing them just a little bit. I'm going to try and keep throwing them in only because I do have a lot on, and I'm really trying to do it, and I get so much out of them. So I'm not saying I'm going to stop, but just bear with me as I try and find the time. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and let me know your thoughts. You can find all the show notes and timestamps and everything else at bennettendurance.com/media. Cheers, guys. Welcome to the Greg Bennett Show. I'm your host, Greg Bennett. And this episode is me. It's me and you. I recap the last quarter. We're halfway through the year, or over halfway now. I go through the great episodes that we've had over this last quarter. And then I spend some time going through what I've come up with, which is the 8 pillars for longevity. And I go through each of those 8. I look at longevity. I will say here, and I've said it before, that I think above my 8 pillars of longevity is understanding that time is your number one commodity. Money will come and go. Maintaining your health obviously is important, and that's where I talk about the 8 pillars of longevity. Would love your feedback on this one, whether you want to agree, disagree, or any kind of feedback. Please let me know what you think of me talking to you directly for 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and sharing my thoughts on the world of triathlon and longevity. I hope you enjoy this episode, and remember, success comes to those who endure just one moment longer.